Hello and welcome to the second Pittsburgh School of the Arts podcast. I'm Destin LaCornu.
And I'm Kate Griffin. We're excited to see all of you here and have all of you listening in today. We've started this podcast specifically just to talk about some different topics that are applicable to both of us in our lives and our businesses, but also for our teachers and our students and our parents and anyone else that listens in, coaches. We feel like everybody could kind of benefit from this topic that we're on right now, which is talking about growth mindset.
Yeah. So what we thought we'd do today is just kind of extend what we were talking a little bit about last time. And so just to recap for anyone who maybe hasn't watched our first episode, the takeaway from the growth mindset is really that our natural response to challenges is sometimes to believe that it's not possible, that we can't do something, especially if we try at it and then fail. It means that we're just not very good. But what almost all research suggests and what our own experience as teachers suggests is that hard work really does pay off.
Yeah, and that a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset is a positive thing. It's something that we're all working on. We're all trying to achieve. I don't know if we ever arrive completely. And I think one of our big takeaways that we were talking about is the fact that when we hit a challenge or a roadblock or an opportunity where we get to practice having a growth mindset, our natural response is not always a positive one.
Right.
Typically, it's uncomfortable, it's painful, we have a negative emotional response to anything that's hard in our lives, anything that we've never done before. And so we have to be very, very intentional to choose to have a growth mindset about something rather than a fixed mindset. And I think that was something that we both took away from that first podcast of saying it's not always a natural response. It's something that we have to kind of train ourselves into having.
Yeah, over and over again, too. Like, even if you're someone who does kind of face your challenges head on, sometimes you can be surprised at what can make you feel like you're a failure, so to speak. And so it's just a process of growing up and proving to yourself that that you really can learn new things regardless of what age you're at or what skills you may already have.
And there's never a lack of opportunity to practice a growth mindset in life, because no matter where you are, there's always going to be new challenges. There's always going to be new struggles. And so whether that's personally or professionally in every aspect of life, this is something that all of us can grow in and become better at and learn to have, an intentional response for that. We also talked about a big takeaway from our first podcast was the power of encouragement.
Yeah.
And this is something that we spoke to as just individuals, friends, as teachers, for me as a parent. And I know we had, coaches listening in and other leaders in business listening in. The power of encouragement and spending time seeing potential in someone else, whether that would be your peer or someone that you're coaching or someone that you're training or teaching, to be able to celebrate their small milestones, as even as small as it may be, to see them making forward progress, and then to say the words, "I'm proud of you," that is so powerful, and we can never do it enough. And so the power of encouragement and encouraging others to grow and say, "I'm proud of you," is a huge takeaway.
Yeah, believe in them until they can believe in themselves.
Yeah, it's a huge honor that we get to do that. And so today we are going to talk a little bit about our limitations. And we just sort of said, okay, we can, we have this motto on our front door that says, "Dream big, the sky is the limit." And we obviously want to encourage this to be a place of creativity where young people can explore their giftings and abilities musically and in all of life, and to be able to not have limitations and to be able to dream big and think that they can be anything that they want to be and have and use their imagination and all of that. But as we learn and as we grow, recognizing too that we do have limitations. And so what are those limitations? How do we accept those limitations as we grow and mature, even as a student, getting into middle school and high school and then becoming into adults? And even now, as we're growing professionally in our adult life, how to accept your limitations and deal with your limitations, because the reality is, we can have these dreams, but those dreams don't always turn into realities.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a danger in believing that you can do everything, so therefore you should do everything. But what we often see is that sometimes, no matter how hard you work at something, and no matter how much you may have the right attitude about it, you encounter difficulty. And so the reality is, we all have natural limitations, some of which we can improve over time. Others we're never going to be able to change. And so we were just kind of looking at, like, what are some of those natural limitations that we're born with and just simply can't change. Genetics, your physical being, as well as a certain amount of the way your brain works. It's estimated that about 30 to 60% of your personality is inherited. So your temperament, some of your natural talents, your predispositions towards certain things, as well as, like, where you were born, your past, who raised you, the things that were very influential at an early age. You can certainly change your mindset about those things, but you can't change what's happened to you in the past. You can't change mistakes that you've made. So these are limitations that you'll never really be able to move past until you accept them. And so, why should we accept our limitations? Why is that a good thing? Because we often have this attitude of, oh, you're not going to tell me I can't do that. I'm going to prove to you that I can.
Right. And I've had that in my own personal life of just, like, as I've grown, like, I've been able to sort of almost shoulder on more responsibilities and take on more things and have more children and sort of reach a certain level. But then there comes a point when we reach our capacity. And we've had this discussion a lot, with just managing our schedules lately and how to, structure our business. And as we grow, like, we realize as adults now, we have limitations, and we have to learn how to manage those limitations, how to accept those limitations, and how to make the most of the time and the energy and the resources that we have. Because I think the older that you get, the more you realize that there are limitations in life. And so, again, another response from me is to see limitations as a negative thing. When in fact, limitations can be a positive thing, because they can help us identify, like you said, where we focus our energy and kind of where we hone in, because we recognize that we don't have all the resources in the world, all the time in the world, all the talents in the world. We can't be everything to everyone at all times. We have to make decisions of saying, all right, well, where am I going to focus my time and my energy? What are my strengths, and how can I best steward and utilize who I am and what I do and what I've been given to the best of its ability, and to reach the greatest capacity. So it's kind of with that framework in mind that we want to talk about limitations, and just how do we accept them? How do we identify them? How do we move forward once we've realized what they are, And how could we actually turn maybe what feels like a negative thing, when we recognize that we have a limitation in something? How could we turn it into a positive?
Yeah. Well, limitations, getting to know our limitations is really just getting to know our personality. We have things that we just love doing. Nobody has to tell us to do those things. We do it because we love it. And most likely that's going to be a strength. And then there are other things where maybe you're not as good at that particular skill, but you are able to do it. But it's all about kind of finding that balance of how to make the time to really, really thrive in your area of expertise. Whatever it is, that thing that you do better than everybody else, that's probably what you were just, like, born to do. And if you spend too much time trying to improve your weaknesses, not that you shouldn't work on your weaknesses, but if you're dwelling on them all the time, if you're letting that really stop you from thriving at what you naturally thrive at, those weaknesses are going to weaken you. It was something I heard once, and I can't remember who said it, but it was the idea that your strengths make you stronger. The more time, the more practice you invest into your strengths, you're going to become stronger overall, because you already have that natural talent that's sort of pushing you along. And if you can really refine it, you're going to go far. your weaknesses, they actually make you weaker. They're taking away from your time to do what you're really, really good at. And so what's interesting about limitations, usually once we encounter our limitations, that's at the point where we really start to recognize how important other people are in our lives, because you're always going to meet somebody who's better at something than you are, and you could go about that one of two ways. You could either try to compete with them and say, oh no, I'm going to prove to you that I can do this, but you may never achieve as good of a result at what you're trying to do. And you're going to deprive yourself of the possibility to collaborate with that person and have that person bring their specialty into your project, your hobby, your career, whatever it is you're doing, and make it that much better. That's why you work with the right people who are experts in their own particular area, and you form an amazing team that can achieve all kinds of things you couldn't do on your own.
I like that. And I think the idea of understanding limitations and coming to know them is a process of discovery. And so as a young person, if I'm speaking to the students, I get to say, this is a time in your life, when you're still in school and you don't have a real world job yet, or you have to make a career decision, that you have the opportunity to really explore and to try all kinds of things and see what you're good at and see what you enjoy. And, sometimes it's very apparent at a young age, if a student has a certain ability, like in music or to work with their hands or, athletically or something like that. And you can start to just sort of see the God-given gifting that's on an individual, and to be able to find that as at a young age is such an amazing thing, so that you can really pour time and energy into that. But it's nice to be able to have the freedom when you're young to just try all kinds of things.
Yeah.
That freedom still exists when you get older, but I think that it is just unlimited in a way that when you're a young person, the sky really is the limit because you're trying to discover who you are. But even once you've chosen a career path, or, you're down a path professionally, it's never too late to learn and things like that. But there's still a process of discovery about our limitations and about kind of who we are, what we enjoy, what our personality is. And like you said, kind of being able to hone in on our strengths. And there's a sort of a power that comes with life experience where you can begin to identify and be self-aware of the fact that, you may be really, really good at this thing, but not quite so good at that thing. And like you said, you can bring other people into your life that are able to complement you and be strong maybe in some areas where you're not. And so I love this sort of idea that understanding limitations is a process of discovery. And I think that just that idea sort of sounds like a growth mindset idea.
It does,
to be able to approach life and challenges and limitations that we face from an opportunity to learn and to make adjustments and to discover, something about yourself or your situation that you didn't know before. I like that idea.
Well, and the cool thing too, especially when you're young, you're not really in a position yet where you have to come to terms with your limitations. That's a process that really starts to take hold in adulthood. So you are free to try anything and everything, and your success at those things isn't necessarily the goal. It's more the sheer exploration and joy of it. And there will come a time in your life where when you're looking at your career, when you're looking at what you're spending your time on, you're going to have to make those priority decisions of what's really worth it. But it doesn't mean that you can't still do those things that you love, even if you don't necessarily achieve tangible success. Limitations can be relative, and they can kind of look different depending on the context. And so while you may have the limitation of never being able to make your hobby your career, it doesn't mean that hobby can't be enjoyable. It doesn't mean you can't still grow and get better and better at it. And so limitations are rarely an absolute thing. It's usually not all or nothing. Like, yes, you're either great at this, or no, you're terrible and you should never even try. There's usually some kind of balance in between.
Yeah. This story came to mind just of my own personal life. And I remember whenever I was in high school, and I am from a family that loves athletics. And so I was involved in a lot of different sports. But at the same time, my music was really flourishing. And I was trying to spend a lot of time, practicing and growing at the piano and singing. And I thought that I probably wanted to do something with music in my future. And so I just remember back to 10th grade, whenever had the opportunity, we had just gotten a new basketball coach, and I had the opportunity to be the team captain. And so I had spent all summer practicing and doing open gyms with the team. And right before season started, we also had just opened a youth center at our church. And so I had leadership there, and I was able to be a part of, forming that and renovating that and running the music with that, and had a lot of leadership opportunities there. And then getting ready to go back to school. And I realized a limitation, that I didn't have time to do everything in all the areas that I was trying to do, academically with school, musically with my music, in leadership, at some of the things that I was being asked to do in leadership, and then with sports. And so I remember making the decision right before season started in 10th grade to not play basketball. And I thought my dad was going to be so disappointed in me, because he loved sports. And of course, he said, "Why would you ever think that, of course I want to support you." And he just responded amazing. But I made this kind of hard decision in 10th grade, to accepting the limitations of time, that I really wanted to free up more time to invest my energy into music and leadership, that I decided not to play basketball that year. And I mean, I love sports. It's, sports is still a part of my life, my kids. I love the lessons that you learn through being a part of a team and athletic and all of that stuff. But that was a really pivotal turning point in my life as a young person, when making a decision and sort of accepting a limitation on my time and energy, and sort of letting go of something that I really, really loved and really enjoyed. But it was sort of superseded by something that I wanted to pursue even more.
Yeah.
And so it was probably a time when I was going through it that didn't feel comfortable or fun. I mean, there were tears that I cried, and I was praying, and I felt like I was letting the coach down and some of my other teammates down, because I wasn't going to play on the team that year. But looking back now, I can see what a decision that helped push my maturity forward, that it was really a turning point in my life that actually was positive, because it freed me up to be able to run towards that which I was even more passionate about, which ended up becoming my career. I went on to study music business and do leadership and do music. And so I'm thankful that as a young person, I learned myself enough to be able to make a decision like that, and I think that those times come in different seasons and different times of life for everyone. Everybody has a different milestone moment, when they're at a different age or whatever. But the idea of being able to kind of release something and accepting a limitation in one area, so that we can kind of really focus in our strengths into an area of passion and run towards something that gives us even more purpose, that we really feel like we're called and created to do, is beautiful. And it turned into be a really positive thing.
That's a great example, because I mean, that's probably one of our biggest limitations of all is time. And what that forces us to do is to make commitments, because if we had unlimited time to do anything and everything, we wouldn't really be all that committed to any one thing in particular. But it forces us to narrow our focus. And like you said, when you're faced with a decision, it feels really uncomfortable. You're having to say no to something so you can say yes to another thing, and there's this fear of like, am I saying yes to the right thing? But you look back on it and you see how just making that decision, it focused your efforts. It gave you a direction. I sometimes think having a direction is more important than which particular direction. It's just choose something and make that decision. And I mean, you'll always have the time if you decide to go in a different direction. You can always change your mind.
Make an adjustment.
Yeah, you can always adjust. But I think it's really important to make those kind of decisions, because time is something that unfortunately we just don't have a lot of.
Yeah.
And so we're always going to be faced with that at every point in our lives. I'm dealing with that right now. So.
And as a young person, there will come a point when, like you said, you do have to pick a path, And
Hmm.
so it's never too late or too early to think about, what is it that not only you're good at, or to find a strength, to find a passion, but just learning about yourself and taking the time to have that process of discovery, but then not be afraid to really throw yourself in towards something.
Hmm.
Um, there's something beautiful with that propels you forward in life, And so,
Yeah.
talking to the young people, I love, talking to my high schoolers who are making decisions about college and sort of asking them questions about, have you thought of what your life would be, on this path or on this path? I mean, you have so many gifts and talents. You could go this way or you could go that way, and then seeing them choose that path and then excel in that path, But even once you're into your job or becoming an adult, there's still this process of discovery where we have the opportunity, like you said, to make adjustments and to learn more about ourselves and the kind of job and the kind of people and the kind of hobbies and the kind of ways that we want to spend and invest our time, and what is the most beneficial and productive way that we can do that.
Yeah, yeah. And you will have time to figure those things out. There's a lot of pressure put on high school and college students to figure that out right then and there, which is almost impossible. I mean, the world is changing, the economy is changing. You never really know what's around the bend for you. And so I've known so many people who have changed their career multiple times. I have. And you'll have that opportunity to get to experiment with some different things, and so there's kind of this balance of making decisions, knowing that you might have another decision that's going to undo that decision later on, but you would have never gotten there if you didn't make that first decision
Yeah.
in the first place. And so I think to kind of tie it back to like what we do as teachers, I think that's something that is we have a lot of influence on our students, regardless of if they're ever going to go on to further pursue music or art as a vocation. What we're kind of helping them do is practice committing to something and
Hmm.
working really hard at it, and discovering what their limitations might be and how to work around that, and even how to move beyond their limitations. And that's going to transfer to whatever they ultimately find themselves doing. But just the kind of opportunity to practice that in a safe, non-judgmental setting like we try to have here, I think that's like the most valuable thing that many of our students are getting.
I actually just had a really great conversation with one of my students this past week, and I feel like he demonstrated a growth mindset in the sense that he's about to finish, one of his books that he's worked all the way through, which happens to be a book that's kind of got the pieces designed to take you from the Baroque and the classical, and so now he's gone through the Romantic period, and he doesn't really love playing, the Baroque stuff and all of the Bach and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and so he's like, well, I'm excited to finish this book, but I'm not so excited to go into the next book because I know it's going to start back over again and I'm going to have to go back to some of that technical stuff,
Yeah.
that he doesn't really love. But then he said, but I kind of am able to see it now as a challenge that's going to make me a better musician, just for the discipline of it and for
Mm-hmm.
the growth of being able to just challenge myself and do something that I don't love, but to push myself beyond my comfort level and being able to just, learn something and do something that is beneficial to me, as an individual. And
Yeah.
so I was like, wow, that's an amazing, mature
That's
response,
awesome.
towards the music that he's doing. But it's so true. It's like the lessons that hopefully we're learning and instilling in our students and teaching them and encouraging them are going to be things that they apply in all of life, not just in music.
Yeah, because you're faced with that same kind of situation like you just described all throughout your life, whether you're making a career change or you're trying to tackle some new personal goal that you have. You're always you're gonna be faced with the hard work on the front end of it and a lot of unknowns. You never really know your limitations until you've gone over your capacity, and then you realize, oh, wow, okay, I'm not quite going to be able to do that, but now at least I know that.
Yes.
And so just like we were kind of talking about with the growth mindset, where it's something you really have to get used to, you have to make it a habit, and then you'll be more natural about going about having that mindset as you're going into a challenge. I think it's the same thing with limitations. As you become used to the idea of accepting your limitations, you'll look at each challenge as an opportunity to get to know your limitations better, get to know your personality better. You'll always learn more about yourself.
It's true.
The more stuff you take on.
And until you reach your limitations, like until you reach your capacity, until you reach that place where you feel stressed or you feel pushed beyond your comfort zone, you'll never truly know what you're capable of, you know?
Yeah.
And I've heard that said so many times that like a young person will believe in themselves to the level that you expect them. You know, like you can have such high expectations, you keep a positive and encouraging environment, and you could be amazed to see how much they really achieve when you make them believe that it's really possible for them to achieve such a thing.
Yeah.
So you want to have your expectations high enough that they are rising up to those expectations, but not so high that they're unable to achieve a measure of success, you know?
Exactly.
And so I think, but that's true for us too, as adults, like that you're never going to know what you're capable of until you push yourself a little bit.
Yeah,
you're never
you
going to
shouldn't
know.
sell yourself short.
No, and you're never going to know what your limitations are until you've gotten close to them, you know, until you've reached them, until you feel like you're too far stretched, you know, then you can kind of understand, all right, I better pull back or adjust this, and your capacity as well. So that's part of a growth mindset and part of, you know, working hard, but also being smart about it and understanding that, you know, you have to make adjustments and we all have limitations.
Yeah, we like to predict, we try to predict the future, even though we're not very good at it. And so we speak things over ourselves in difficult situations like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do that. That's too much for me. It's beyond my capacity. But you don't really know until you test the evidence.
Yeah, you won't know until you try.
Yeah. So work off of concrete evidence, I think, is kind of the takeaway here. Treat it as an experiment.
That's good.
And you might be surprised what you learn.
I like that. Cool. All right. Well, dangers of not accepting your limitations. I guess like the last thing kind of that we talked about was working hard towards the wrong things. We want to pick something, try it, step out, work hard at that thing, and then be willing to make adjustments. Be willing to be self-aware. Be willing to get feedback. You know, have people that are able to coach you or be a teacher in your life to give you feedback that can help you learn what your strengths and weaknesses are if you don't know them already. Grow to an extent in areas that you're weak in, but really focus on trying to really grow your strengths.
Yeah, and always be coming back to that place of reflection where you're asking yourself, what did I accomplish by doing this? Because I think sometimes the danger is if you believe that all you need is hard work to be successful at something, you might be doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think that's kind of setting us up for our next podcast, where we're going to talk about what happens if you're working really hard at something and you're not seeing results. It may actually be that your learning strategy needs some work. It might be that you're implementing some ineffective processes. And so sometimes it may not be your fault. It may be that you just need a different approach. You need some outside advice to kind of show you a different way to do something.
Cool. I look forward to exploring that more. And in the meantime, kind of leaving our listeners with the courage to say, try something new this week. You know?
Yeah, do something that scares you.
Yeah, and be willing to just be self-aware and see what happens. And maybe you might surprise yourself. You might stumble upon a strength or an area that you thought was a limitation that isn't. But it'll be encouraging to see, you know, what comes of this even as we apply this in our own life. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for the conversation. Thank you all for listening in. And I'm Kate Griffin, and this is Destin LaCourneau. We look forward to seeing you next time.